What's up, addicts? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. In this video, we are going to be taking a look at Amari Cooper and breaking down his potential fantasy outlook for 2020. But before we get started, hit that like and subscribe button for more videos like this one. And also check out our website, fantasyaddictionnetwork.com, for a full list of rankings. But without further ado, let's check out Amari Cooper. Now, I don't like Amari Cooper. I do, but I don't. It's the worst. Trying to break down Amari Cooper every year is honestly it's a fool's errand, and we'll get into why. But at the same point, I still haven't projected very highly. So I might sound like I feel like I have a little bit of Stockholm syndrome. Like you have this guy that has the potential to be the number one, not even just a wide receiver one. Like if everything went right for Amari Cooper, he could literally finish as the number one overall wide receiver. But we've been saying that for years, and something keeps happening that prevents it from happening. So it's the ultimate boom bust, massive upside, massive risk play that you can draft, which in the third round, which is typically where you'd have to take him, sometimes he's fallen to the fourth, but I don't think his ADP is going to shift too much heading into draft season here in the next couple months. So expecting to have to spend a third round pick for him. If you take two running backs early, drafting a guy like this as your wide receiver one is not something that I normally recommend doing, but I'll lay out the case for why you could consider it this year. So when we look at 2019, he finishes the year with 79 receptions, close to 1,200 receiving yards, and 8 total touchdowns. After coming in the previous year and only playing half of the season with the Cowboys and scoring 7 touchdowns, we're expecting a little bit more in the touchdown total, but overall, not a bad season when you consider the totality of it. Finishes with 246.5 fantasy points, that puts him at 10th, and finishes with 15.4 points per game, 14th best at the position. Anyone that owned Amari Cooper, though, knows what I'm about to get into when we look at his game logs. Absolutely gross bottom. His floor is literally zero. He scored 0 points after getting 2 targets against the New England Patriots. They just absolutely shut him down. His home road splits were insane, playing much better at home and just almost disappearing. Now, there is a little bit of a caveat. During week 10, he suffered a knee sprain, and from that point on, you can see his boom weeks were much lower and his floor became even smaller. So that is the biggest caveat to say that, well, if you look at the first 10 weeks of the season, yes, he did have that 1.3 point game against the Jets. But that was an overall pretty lackluster performance by the Cowboys as a whole against the Jets that week. And then other than that, he had 2 mediocre games against Washington and New Orleans in week 2 and week 4 on the road, but they weren't like kill your team weeks. They were both 9.8 points, pretty close to 10, and then pretty close to 15 points there against Washington. So only one really bad week during that span before the knee injury, and then once the knee injury comes, well, that's when you saw a massive turn south for Amari Cooper. So we kind of have to take that whole thing into context. They did sign Amari Cooper to a new extension this year, so you could make the argument that he's not fighting for money. But when you look at the actual makeup of the contract, it's pretty much a 2-year deal for Amari Cooper. It's a 5-year deal in total, but after 2 years, they can pretty much get out without any dead cap space. So when you consider that, there's a very high probability that if CeeDee Lamb comes on and becomes the dominant wide receiver one, they'll just cut Amari Cooper after 2 years. So he still has to continue to fight for the continuation of that contract if he wants to stick around for more than 2 years. So it's not like he doesn't have any incentive anymore to play. So I don't think this contract extension really is going to affect his attitude towards the game. Now, obviously, I mentioned CeeDee Lamb. That's the biggest change up to this offense. Upgrading from Randall Cobb to CeeDee Lamb is going to be pretty huge. Gets to wear number 88. Obviously, that is a prestigious number for a wide receiver to get to wear in Dallas. And I do expect CeeDee Lamb to eventually take over as the wide receiver one, but I don't think it happens in 2020. with everything that's going on right now, the lack of rookie training camps, mini camps, this is going to be very hard for many rookie wide receivers to truly take over a massive foothold in the offense this year, because wide receiver is one of the most crucial positions to have that time and that building up that rapport with the rest of the team. Got to learn the playbook. It takes wide receivers a little bit longer to get acclimated than, say, like a running back to a new team. And rookies as a whole are going to have a very tough time this year, but I don't think every position is going to be as impacted. Wide receivers are one that is going to be pretty difficult for a rookie wide receiver to break out in 2020. A lot of things are going to have to go right for that to happen. So I'm not concerned that CeeDee Lamb is going to eat into Amari Cooper's touch total massively heading into 2020. We're also expecting a pretty heavy offense loaded Cowboys this year with that a massive downgrades to their defense. We're expecting a lot of points to be scored. Love Dak this year, so by extension, really love Amari Cooper for that reason. Just have to take into consideration that even when he was healthy, this type of stat line was pretty common for Amari Cooper. He's like the best asset you could possibly own in best ball, and outside of best ball, yeah. But again, I'm recognizing that first 10 weeks without that knee sprain, he would have finished really well. And I actually even broke that out. So when we just isolate prior to knee sprain, so weeks 1 through 10, he had 179.8 fantasy points and he was averaging 20 fantasy points per game. That was fourth best for both of those categories. So he was a elite wide receiver one for the first 10 weeks of the season. Then that knee sprain crops up and limited him for the rest of the year and drops all the way, finishing at 10th. But over that span, he was really unplayable for most weeks. So that knee injury definitely derailed his season. But if it didn't happen, if he would have been able to continue that massive production, finishing as a number 4 receiver, someone that you would have drafted later in the third round last year, I mean, you're taking the same gamble on him again this year, but he's shown again, it's this constant frustration of he can do it, he should do it, he has the talent to do it. Will he do it? Hard to know. I understand the upside and really think that if he actually has a whole healthy year this year, he could definitely finish as a top 3 wide receiver, so it's worth the risk. It's just hard to make that risk when he's your number 1 wide receiver. So if you'd end up taking Amari Cooper, you kind of have to shift your draft strategy to build a floor of wide receivers around him, take guys that have less of a risk later, and make sure you have obviously a strong running back core. Because if you have a strong running back core and you have Amari Cooper with the potential to give you 30-point blow up weeks, drafting him in the third round, that's really going to make your team hard to beat. But you're really going to need to make sure you build out that floor in case he gives you a dud. Let's look at some of these other stats though, kind of showing them here. 19th in deep targets, not as high as I was expecting to see, but yards per target, he was number 9 in the NFL, yards per pass route, number 10. So does a lot with the passes that he did get. His true catch rate was pretty pathetic, 79.8%, which is 63rd best in the NFL. Again, a lot of that coming towards the end of the year once he pretty much just turned into a completely lackluster receiver. Really high production premium, though. This is pretty common across the entire Dallas Cowboys offense. So we're expecting good things out of him this year. Assuming health, this is probably closer to his floor, getting 82 receptions, 1,153 receiving yards, and 8 total touchdowns. That would put him at 242 fantasy points, right around wide receiver 10, 11, putting him in the wide receiver 1 category. But again, his upside ranking cannot be ignored. This could turn very, very positively if he is the main guy, he stays healthy, and is able to produce like he did over the first 10 weeks of last season for an entire season. Could easily break the 300-point fantasy point barrier. He was already on track to do so last year, averaging 20 points a game. He would have finished the season with about 320 fantasy points. So it's possible. And while the risk is definitely high, if you're playing the balls to the wall strategy, you're pretty much looking at taking a guy like Amari Cooper or Odell Beckham. I think Odell Beckham probably gives you a little bit more of a floor. I feel a little bit safer with taking OBJ in the middle to the late third round. But if you're looking for massive upside and just want to go for the jugular, if you go heavy running back in the first couple of rounds and just want to take a shot at a wide receiver that could massively outperform his ADP, I don't fault you for taking Amari Cooper. I know a lot of people are recommending taking Michael Gallup later. I do have some concerns with Michael Gallup's target concentration now that CeeDee Lamb is there. So I'm not opposed to taking Amari Cooper in the third round. There's just some other receivers that I feel safer taking, like Allen Robinson or Odell Beckham Jr., DJ Moore. But if all those guys are gone, I'm definitely taking Amari Cooper over other guys around him that have a similar risk profile because they don't have the same upside that Amari Cooper gives you. And although upside isn't necessarily something that you need to consider as highly in the third round, it's definitely something to note with Amari Cooper. So that's pretty much my take on him. I know that isn't very definitive, and I don't think you really can be definitive with Amari Cooper. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, and thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next video.